Nobody respects the loudest person in the room, and nobody fears them either. You have been told your entire life that speaking up is power, that having a voice matters, that the person who talks most confidently commands the most respect. You have watched that belief cost you in rooms where it counted most, where you said too much and lost ground you did not even know you had, where your words revealed your position before you knew what position you were actually in, where the person who said almost nothing walked away with everything. That was not luck. That was not charisma. That was a 500-year-old principle that Machiavelli documented in modern neuroscience has since proven with uncomfortable precision. The most dangerous people in any room are almost never the loudest ones. They are the ones you cannot read, the ones whose next move you cannot predict, the ones who listen more than they speak and whose silence creates a gravitational pull that words never could. A 2020 study from Columbia University examined how silence functions in high-stakes social and professional interactions. Their finding was direct. Individuals who spoke significantly less than their peers in high-pressure situations were rated as significantly more intelligent, more trustworthy, and more authoritative by the other participants regardless of what they actually said when they did speak. They were not rated higher because of what they said. They were rated higher because of what they did not say. The silence itself was the signal. Stay with me until the end because the final reason silence makes you untouchable is the one that most people have experienced but never had explained to them. And it is the one that changes everything about how you enter any room. Subscribe right now, because what we build here is the psychological edge that the most effective people alive use every single day while everyone else is still talking. Drop this in the comments right now. I speak with intention, or I do not speak at all. You have been in a conversation where you knew you talked too much, where the words kept coming, and some part of you was watching it happen and registering the cost in real time, but could not stop it. Where your nervousness or your excitement or your need to fill the silence drove you to say things you had not planned to say, to reveal things you had not intended to reveal, to give away ground you did not even know was yours, to protect. And afterward you replayed it, knowing something had shifted, knowing the other person now had information about you that you had not consciously chosen to give them. That experience is what Machiavelli was writing about when he documented the power of silence. Not the romantic, philosophical kind of silence. The operational, strategic kind that the most effective rulers, negotiators, and leaders in history have used as their primary instrument of power. Number 1, silence forces the other person to reveal themselves. In 1502, Machiavelli was sent to negotiate with Cesare Borgia on behalf of Florence. He arrived, expecting the kind of meeting he had been trained for: talking, presenting Florence's position, making arguments, offering terms. Borgia opened the meeting and then said almost nothing for 40 minutes. Machiavelli documented what happened in that room in his dispatches to Florence. He wrote that in the silence he found himself saying things he had not planned to say, revealing Florence's actual priorities beneath the stated ones, showing his hand in ways that a skilled interlocutor could read with precision, not because he was naive, because the silence created a pressure that words would have neutralized. Borgia had not extracted that information through clever questioning. He had extracted it through the simple, disciplined act of saying nothing and letting the silence do the work. This is what the modern research confirms. A 2019 study from the Harvard Negotiation Project found that the single most effective information extraction technique in high-stakes negotiations was not skilled questioning. It was strategic silence following a partial disclosure. When one party said something and then stopped and waited, The other party consistently filled the silence with information they had not intended to share. In 81% of observed cases, 81%, not because the people were bad negotiators, because human beings are neurologically wired to fill silence. It creates discomfort that most people cannot sit inside without speaking, and speaking to fill silence almost always costs more than the discomfort of staying quiet would have. Real talk. Think about the last time someone went quiet after you said something and you felt the pull to keep talking, to explain yourself, to add context that made your position clearer, to soften or qualify what you had just said. That pull was not weakness. That was your nervous system doing what nervous systems do in the presence of social uncertainty. Silence reads as ambiguity. Ambiguity triggers anxiety. Anxiety produces speech. The person who can sit in that silence without filling it has just handed themselves an extraordinary advantage in almost every interaction that matters. Machiavelli once wrote that it is better to act and repent than not to act and repent. But before action, he understood that observation was required, and observation requires silence. Drop this in the comments. Let silence do the work that words would cost me. You just understood why silence extracts information. Now here is the part that changes how people perceive you before you say a single word. Number 2, silence creates mystery, and mystery creates power. In 1513, when Machiavelli was writing The Prince, in exile, he documented something he had observed across every court he had ever worked in. The figures who commanded the most consistent deference and the most durable influence were almost never the most verbose ones. They were the ones nobody could fully map. The ones whose opinions on critical matters were known only when they chose to reveal them, whose emotional state was readable only to the degree they permitted it to be, whose next move remained genuinely uncertain to the people around them, even after years of close observation. Machiavelli wrote that everyone sees what you appear to be, but few experience what you really are. Silence is the primary instrument by which that gap is maintained, because the person who speaks constantly gives everyone around them a complete and continuously updated map of who they are, what they value, what they fear, and what they want. And a completely mapped person is a controllable person. A 2021 study from the University of Amsterdam examined how perceived mystery affected social status and influence in both professional and social contexts. Their finding confirmed what Machiavelli had observed empirically 5 centuries earlier. Individuals who revealed less about their inner states, their opinions, and their intentions were consistently rated as higher status, more influential, and more worthy of respect than equally capable individuals who communicated more openly. The mechanism the researchers identified was precise. Mystery activates the human drive for completion. When we cannot fully map another person, we continue investing cognitive and social resources in trying to do so. That investment itself produces a form of attention and regard that transparency never generates. Here is what this means in practical terms. Every time you share your opinion before someone asks for it, you spin down your mystery. Every time you explain your reasoning when silence would have been sufficient, you give away information about how you think. Every time you fill a pause with words to avoid the discomfort of being perceived as not knowing what to say, you hand the room a piece of your map that it did not need to have. The most powerful version of you in any room is the version that nobody has fully figured out yet. A case study. David was a mid-level manager who transformed his professional reputation not by developing new skills or taking on more visibility, but by changing one specific behavior. He stopped speaking in meetings until he had something genuinely worth saying. He stopped filling silences with qualifications and explanations. He stopped sharing his opinion on matters before he had fully formed it. Within 3 months, his colleagues and his leadership had begun describing him with words they had never used before: measured, strategic, authoritative. Not because his ideas had changed, because the silence around his ideas had changed. How those ideas landed. Machiavelli once wrote that the first impression that one gets of a ruler and of his brains is from seeing the men that he has about him. The first impression people get of your intelligence is from watching how you manage your words. And the person who speaks least often speaks most powerfully. Drop this in the comments. Mystery is not deception. Mystery is strategy. And I am choosing it deliberately. You understand why silence extracts information and creates mystery. Now here is the third principle that explains why silent people are almost always the most dangerous ones in any room. Number 3, silence gives you the advantage of complete information. Here is what nobody tells you about the people who talk least in any high-stakes situation. They are not quiet because they have nothing to say. They are quiet because they are doing something that the people talking cannot do. Simultaneously, they are listening with the specific quality of attention that only becomes available when you have stopped planning your next contribution to the conversation. Most people in any conversation are not listening. They are waiting for a gap in which to insert what they have already decided they want to say. Their attention is divided between tracking what the other person is saying and maintaining the thread of their own prepared response. The person who has decided not to speak until they have something genuinely worth saying is doing something entirely different. They are receiving complete information. They're noticing things about what is being said and how it is being said and what is being deliberately not said that the speakers themselves are not noticing, because the act of speaking consumes the attentional bandwidth required to observe. A 2022 study from MIT's Sloan School of Management examined decision quality in high-pressure group settings. They found that the individuals who spoke least in the first half of high-stakes discussions made significantly better decisions than their more vocal counterparts. Not because they were more intelligent, because they had more complete information, because they had been actually listening while the other participants had been performing. Real talk. Think about the last genuinely important conversation you were part of. How much of your attention was on what the other person was actually communicating versus on what you're going to say next? For most people, the honest answer is that most of their attention was on their own next contribution, which means most of what the other person was actually communicating was received at reduced quality, or not received at all. Within those 6 months, his reputation and his organization had transformed. People began saving space for his contribution at the end of discussions in a way they never had when he was contributing at the beginning, because the position at the end of the conversation turned out to be the most powerful one, the one with complete information, the one that arrived after everyone had revealed themselves, the one that the silence had made possible. Machiavelli once wrote that men are so simple of mind and so much dominated by their immediate needs that a deceitful man will always find plenty who are ready to be deceived. The reverse is also true. The silent person will always find plenty who are ready to reveal themselves, because silence creates the pressure that makes revelation almost inevitable. Drop this in the comments. I speak last. I speak once. And I make it count. Now you have the complete framework for strategic silence. Silence extracts information that questions never could. Silence creates Mystery that makes you unmappable and therefore uncontrollable. Silence gives you the complete information that only becomes available when you stop producing sound and start truly receiving it. And silence held before speech makes the speech itself land with a weight that constant talking can never achieve. The most powerful person in any room tomorrow does not have to be the most impressive. They just have to be the one who speaks least and listens most, who lets the room reveal itself before they reveal themselves. Machiavelli called silence one of the most formidable weapons available to anyone who has the discipline to actually use it. 500 years later, the research agrees. The question I want you to answer in the comments today: think of the last situation where you spoke when you should have stayed silent. What did it cost you? Name it, because naming it is the beginning of not repeating it.